Hi, I'm John Fredrickson, and welcome to the ICDP Institute. Now we'll take a look at another defense, denial. Denial is a way to ignore reality. And Anna Freud described 4 ways we can do just that. There's denial per se. We can say that something in reality just simply doesn't exist. We also can have denial and fantasy. Here, we pay attention to a fantasy rather than reality. Then we can have denial in words. Here is where we pay attention to what someone says rather than what he does. And then we have denial in deed. Here we can behave as if something does not exist. Now, when a patient uses denial, assess it. Is the patient's denial due to an inability to test reality? That would be a sign of psychotic illness. Or does the patient see reality but deny it to avoid internal emotional conflict? That's a sign of neurotic illness. Many defenses can be enlisted for the purpose of denying reality. For example, withdrawal of attention. When a patient uses denial, she can withdraw her attention from external stimuli or internal feelings that cause pain or anxiety. She sees neither the stimulus nor her feeling because she doesn't look at them. She might say, "It's true he left, I just don't think about it." Another form of denial is negative hallucination. The patient sees what is not there to avoid is there in reality. She might say, "Well, he asked me to set the wedding date," when in fact her fiancé had just ended the engagement. Another form of denial is less extreme, and that's ignoring. It's less extreme because reality can be brought back into focus. When patients ignore the stimulus that triggered their feeling, or when they ignore their feelings, they fail to see essential aspects of reality, and they misperceive the meaning of events. For example, a patient might say, "He said he wanted to break up with me, but I don't think that's why I'm depressed." That would be an example of seeing the stimulus but ignoring one's feelings about it. Another form is negation. The patient perceives her feeling but negates its meaning. For example, a patient who's just been cruelly rejected by her ex-fiancé might say, "I don't feel angry." Minimization. The patient perceives the stimulus, for instance the rejection, but minimizes her emotional reaction to it. For example, she might say, "Maybe I feel a little bothered." She minimizes her feeling. Over-exaggeration. The patient not only denies reality, but she exaggerates the opposite feeling. And she believes this exaggerated fantasy to avoid facing the reality of his rejection. For example, she might say, "I'm even more in love with him than ever. I can hardly wait to make love to him again." Reversal. The patient changes her experience of anger into its opposite. After having been rejected by her ex-fiancé, she might say, "I feel quite happy. I'm a liberated woman now." We could also have the defense of ridicule as a form of denial. Here, the patient perceives the stimulus, the rejection, but denies its importance and thus the reality of any feeling response. Regarding his rejection, she might say, "Oh, that was nothing. I've had many men before. I'll have many men in the future." Then we can have fantasy as a form of denial. Here, the patient acknowledges her perception of reality, but changes it into a less threatening fantasy. She relates only to those parts of reality that are consistent with her fantasy. So here, her fantasy about reality takes precedence over her perception of reality. She might say, "I know he'll get over it. He really loves me. It's just a phase he's going through." In other words, she pays attention to her fantasy rather than the reality of the rejection. All forms of denial interfere with the perception of reality. The patient does not see, avoids, or distorts what she perceives. Reality is not threatening because she does not perceive it. Now that we've shown many ways that we can engage in denial, we'll look at one of the most basic forms of denial, denial per se. In my book, Co-Creating Change, you'll be able to read even more about these defenses and how to help patients with them.